The recording has begun. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the April meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee. The recording has begun, so that I will sort of chair the meeting today because Kalina sadly has lost her voice. She left it somewhere at the college, and they're looking for it, but I'm sure they'll find it fairly soon. That said, let me just get the agenda if I can. One moment, please. Lois, do we have a quorum?
Oh God, hold on a second. Yes, I think we do.
Good. I am looking for the agenda. And I have misplaced it for the moment. Lena, could you put the agenda up on the shared screen? Don't see it yet. Here we go. So there we have the agenda. First of all, approval of the March 2023 minutes. Kalina, again, could you put that up? Okay. And let's just scroll through it. Were there any additions that anybody had for the agenda? There it is. Or modifications? That's a slow scroll. Oh, there we go. Okay, not hearing any modifications. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March meeting?
Moved.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Fine. Minutes are approved. Let's go to the agenda for today's meeting. Are there any additions that anybody would like to make? If not, let's have a motion to approve the agenda.
Moved.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Okay, motion approved. So we're going to go on to 3 reports of the chair and the vice chair. And let me put up, if I can, just in a second, the report of the chair, which I'll read out. I hope that's the report of the chair. So for the report of the chair, that's to say Kalina, of note, an irregularity with the approval process for Eastern's nursing program. The nursing program was presented to the board's ASA committee before it had gone through the entire curricular governance process at Eastern. It was brought to the board for approval on April 6th, but scheduled for a vote at XU's Senate on April 18th. given that there's another meeting of the ASA committee May 5th before the meeting of the BOR on May 18th, it's not clear why it was necessary to preempt the university's governance. Provost Salka explained this here, that it was a matter of making sure that everything was processed in time to enroll students in the fall, and assured us that if EXU Senate voted it down, the item would be pulled from the May 18th BOR agenda, and they would, quote, start from scratch. This means, however, that the version that was approved by ASA did not benefit from the input from the Senate. Provost Katuria, and we had a meeting with him on this subject yesterday, has offered the following. The situation highlighted the fact that though items that come to the academic council are presumed to have completed their governance processes at their home institutions, there is currently no formal process for confirming that they have. The remedy: 1. Forms will be replaced with new forms that require documentation of dates of department, curriculum committee, Senate, and President approval. 2. Provost Salko will return to the ASA on May 5th to confirm that the program has the necessary approvals. Lena notes some of you might want to take a glance at the sabbatical leave approvals. Item 2 of the report is, well, is there comments? Are there further comments? I guess maybe we can stop here and just ask if there are comments on this situation at EXU at Eastern Connecticut. I have lost my screen. Hang on a second. And so while displaying this, I can't see. Does anybody want to speak up? I'm afraid I've lost my ability to see who is speaking or who has put up their hand, if anybody. But what I can say is the following. The process here, although there was a obvious glitch and a significant problem at Eastern, has, I think, been properly, or is in the process of being properly corrected. So the FAC member at Eastern, Brandon Cunningham, drew this to our attention and drew it to the attention of the university community at Eastern. Colina brought up the matter, I think quite politely and discreetly, at the last ASA meeting. And that alerted both the chair of the ASA committee, Regent Bloom, as well as the assistant provost, Ray Katuria, that there was a difficulty. And Colina and I, as chair and vice chair of the FAC, had a meeting with Provost Katuria yesterday, and he was quite clear that he wished to make sure that that kind of a situation doesn't recur. And so the measures that we've just mentioned in terms of checking, and one of the things that was made clear was that there didn't seem to be a mechanism for the ASA committee to check that, in fact, all the steps have been followed. Consequently, the modification of the form to require the dates of approval at each of the steps, department, curriculum committee, Senate, and also institutional president, would be required for the forms from now on in order to prevent a recurrence. Let me stop the sharing just for a moment so I can actually see if anybody is putting up their hands. Brendan, do you have anything more that you wanted to say?
I think you've summarized it very well, David. I want to thank David and Kalina for sort of considering the information that was forwarding to them from campus about this particular issue. I was not even aware that this proposal had reached sort of a BOR subcommittee level until another faculty member pointed it out to me. And when I contacted the faculty email distribution list on my campus, I received a number of messages noting that the process was not something people were very familiar with in terms of norms. And so, yeah, I really appreciate David and Kalina tracking this down, because, I do think that full information at the BOR level about what's happening on campuses is really in everyone's interest. So thank you.
Yeah, on this matter, I think the system worked like it should. And that's a contrast with what has happened in past years, where we talked in the wind. Here on this matter, I think we've gotten the process going in order to fully satisfy the needs that we have. Okay, the second point on Kalina's report is for consortial degrees. The story is there is no plan. Conversations are happening between provost and the system has asked them for funding to even make it possible. If it becomes possible and if the provosts agree, then the provost will bring these conversations to their campuses. Until then, it's just a conversation about capacity and willingness. I think the reference here, Kalina, correct me if I'm wrong, is to the 30 online programs that had been proposed at the level of the 4 universities. And we had asked, again, to senior folks at the system office exactly what they had in mind and how far this process had gone along. Mike Shea.
Thanks, David. I didn't get my hands up in time. I just want to comment on the last issue, if that's
Go
okay.
ahead. Sorry.
Thanks. First of all, thanks for tracking that down. And secondly, like you said, the system seemed to work as it did. I wonder if that's because, the way I read that information, it's partly because the provost helped make it happen, the system provost. And if I'm right about that, I just think it's good that we keep that in mind, because it all makes a difference about it. To me, it's not just the structures that we have, but it's the people who carry out the structures or avoid the structures. So I think, we met with him. He seemed very reasonable and collaborative. And I just thought it was good that he seemed to help solve this problem too, because I really don't want programs going to the system office outside of campus governance issues. So I'm glad that he didn't insist on, I just thought that was a good sign, and we should probably acknowledge it. And again, thanks for tracking all that down, Brendan, and because it's really clear that we don't want to set any precedents, even if it's by accident. So that's all I want to say. Thanks. I'm sorry I wasn't in time.
No, that's fine. It's an appropriate comment. And yeah, I think that kudos go to Brendan for identifying the problem and to Provost Couture for beginning to solve it. So we'll look forward to the new form. And also, let's be vigilant about the processes and just make sure that there isn't any short-circuiting, even if there are, practical reasons that seem to be, at least to those people doing the short-circuiting, compelling. We need to know that everything has gone according to a shared governance procedure. Are there any comments on the consortial degrees? I mean, this is just apparently at this stage talk. There doesn't seem to be any concrete steps to implementing these, and it'll be a matter for discussion amongst the provosts of the 4 universities. And obviously, once again, the initiation of such programs will have to be by faculty at the universities. So again, the bottom-up procedure for curriculum, that has to be respected as well. Any comments? If not, I'll go on to the next point in Kalina's report. Industry recruitment. There are efforts to support our enrollment by courting area businesses and demonstrating how we can meet their continuing education needs. The focus on returning students is an effort to reckon with declining population of traditional college-aged students. And if I may preempt Kalina here and try and channel for her, this is going to be a big issue for us in the future. We know that there is out there a movement by at least some corporations and industries to say, well, really, you don't need a bachelor's degree. All you need is a high school leaving or maybe a certificate at most, and we'll train you. And I suppose, they will train them for the specific job that they are expected to do. The problem arises when they want to do something else and they want to progress in their field, and they find themselves limited by the fact that they have no more than a high school degree or at most, a certificate at the college, community college level. So I guess that's going to be something we'll be looking at. It's a complicated situation because of the Great Resignation and the number of entry-level positions that are open at this point. But I think we need to continue to insist on the importance of associate's degrees at the community college level, not just merely a certificate or two. And secondly, transfer to four-year universities. Lois, did you have something?
No, David, nothing.
Okay. And finally, legislature. Today, the Finance and Bonding Committee hearing includes a $2.1 billion ask over 7 years as an extension of CSCU 2030, because that structure gives us more immediate access to the funds. There are quite a few members of the CC Community College community testifying to urgent needs that would address longstanding health and safety risks at the colleges. The administration's ask includes these projects and many others. The projects are not prioritized. Colina shared the list of projects, bill and bill summary with all of you earlier this week, and there is a link in the agenda to the testimony page. So that brings up the whole budget issue, but we're in the midst of the scrimmaging at the level of the legislature. I don't know if we have any more information about what is happening as between what the governor's budget proposed and what eventually will be approved by the legislature. But that's still some time into the future. The building and infrastructure ask is apparently being proposed, as I think it should be, as a separate bill, which even if it were passed, would nonetheless be dependent on the governor's convening the bonding commission and actually approving a particular request for one of the funding requests. And Colleen notes, which I think is a weakness in the proposal, there are really no explanations of justifications for some of the bigger items and any sort of priorities, including what is perhaps uppermost, namely health and safety concerns at some of the community colleges and perhaps at some of the universities that need immediate remediation. So the legislature will be approving the final budget is it in May, Colina? So we'll have a chance to talk about this again. And I know that many people have testified on behalf of some of the requests. Brendan?
I just had a quick note that a faculty member at Eastern sent to me. They said on page 13, it states that the HPE department will share the new sports center. Does it matter that there is no longer a HPE department? Our administration dissolved the HPE department. And so they're asking, like, what does that mean in the proposal? So I told them I would forward their question at the FAC. In addition, I encourage this faculty member to be cautious about getting too excited about this bonding, because even if it gets through the General Assembly, the bonding commission has to approve it, and there is a legacy of certain elected parties killing projects that they don't seem to like through the bonding commission. So that's
Right.
just what.
Eastern had one of the larger items in the building and infrastructure request, and that was somewhere in the over 150 million for that sports facility. And so you're saying that the HPE department, which has now been dissolved, would have its remnants also housed there? That's health and physical education, I presume.
Yes. Well, in fact, I think they had changed from HPE to kinesiology before they were dissolved. But in any event, this faculty member was pointing out that the Eastern portion of things doesn't align with the actual departments we have right now. So, like I said, I just offered to forward faculty input as I try to do as much as possible to the FAC.
Good.
So, thank you.
Yeah, and that's useful for our information. I mean, what obviously was done in that basically is a spreadsheet put into PDF format was to gather together all the requests that had ever been made and put them all together. I mean, I can say for Central, I've noticed something strange, which is that there's a two tranche total of about $160 million in the 2007, 2008 timeframe, approximately, as best I recall, for a STEM building. But we've recently just built an engineering building, which has a lot of top-notch facilities, including artificial intelligence and virtual reality labs. And I know that at the University Senate, because I'm on the Senate Steering Committee, next week we'll be discussing the task force report of a proposed College of Health and Rehabilitative Services. That's the last title for it that I heard. It may subsequently be changed, but that's not in the request. And I know that they were talking about having a building specifically for this, including a walk-in clinic for the community. So that's another anomaly. Last point in Kalina's report. Next Wednesday or so, the Appropriations Committee will present the budget. So that's something for us to follow more closely. Given that much of our funding was supplemented by one-time funds in the past few years, that the governor's budget looks to wean us off these one-time funds, and that there is only $57 million left under the spending cap beyond the governor's budget for all services across the state. And I now quote Dr. Sasanker, quote, "It looks very bleak," unquote. And I think that's correct. The governor's budget proposed the baseline for 2023 to be carried forward. $97 million of the so-called transition money from the HERF funding, which is one half of what it had been in 2022. And also includes the $40 million wage increases for the 2024 year and the 2025, $45 million. It's not clear how in the second year the total for CSCU is only increased by $8 million, which is barely 2%. That certainly wouldn't even cover inflation. And then that leaves all the extra close to $200 million requested in CSCU 2030. So I take it, Kalina, that you would concur with me that that seems unlikely. And so we'll look at this in greater detail once we have seen the Appropriation Committee's report and basically what has been done at the level of the Assembly. Lena, did you have anything else that you wanted to add? By mental telepathy, I could read your mind and then say it out loud. Well, okay. So that wasn't good news about the budget, and we're hopeful that it will be increased at least somewhat. That said, my report basically is nothing additional to what I think Kalina has already reported. So I'm just going to move on to the next item in the agenda. Although I think, let me just add one thing. I think all of the reps from the 4 universities, we should get together, either online or, we can come down to Central and we have some nice lounge space. And we should discuss some of the issues specifically affecting the universities. I mean, obviously, Mike, there's going to be a presidential search at Southern. Was this a surprise that the incumbent president was leaving?
Yes, it was a big surprise. Back in whenever it was announced, I think he was very happy here. We were happy with him. The reason he's going back to where he's moving to this other place is it's where his family is. His father, who's ailing, is near. It's near there, and his husband is down there. So I don't think he was looking to leave, but I think this particular place was good for him. And I think I've talked to him a few times. I think he's pretty sad, actually. I think it was a situation where he had two things torn between two things that made him happy. I think he liked being at Southern. So there has been he helped select an interim, and then there will be a search, I guess. And I know our president, faculty senate president, union president have spoken to President Chang about trying to make sure that there's a committee that is fully representative, and they reported back that he seemed open to making sure that it was you know, a committee that would satisfy some of the faculty requests.
Okay, well, that's a significant, transition that's about to happen at Southern. And of course, Western has at this point an interim president. They would presumably be inaugurating a search, likely next year. That would be the second year of the interim president's period in office. But I think that would be a good idea if we could do something for the 4 universities and have a little chit chat about shared governance, process, the relationship between administration and faculty. So let me try and organize that. Maybe, for next Friday at this time, which is, usually a good time for all of us. Would that be okay, David Stoloff? Would that be okay for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just say something? I know there's a hand up, but I just wanted to say from Linda, David, I think maybe you and I could talk right after this meeting. I think it would be good to talk to the union presidents. That I don't know if you remember when VJ was president of the CSU AUP.
Yep.
There were meetings and I know David was involved in some of these. He called a meeting of all 4 Senate presidents, all 4 university, all 4 union presidents, and all 4 FAC representatives, and all 4 curriculum chairs. So there would be 16 people there, plus the 4 leaders of the CSU AUP. So it'd be 20 people, and we had retreats once a month. I mean, once or twice a semester. And I think that it's something I'd like to talk to you about, trying to get Louise to think about doing that. So I don't want to take up all this time about that, but maybe when this is over, you and I could chat.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of that got preempted by by COVID, but nonetheless, I think I agree with you. Greater sharing of information and coordination of action is always a good thing.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Linda.
Linda, go ahead.
That's okay. And I'm not the expert on this, and actually Mike may have more recollection of this than I do, but in the past, I remember when there were some sort of interest groups like you were proposing, talking about having separate meetings. We were cautioned against that because of this being a public meeting format, needing to have to publish the agenda and the minutes and stuff like that. So I'm not sure if what you're proposing with the CSUs is applicable to that. And I guess I also want to take the chance to remind everyone that while we are the state's public online college, we do award up to graduate degrees, and we're not a university, and we're not one of the CSUs, but we're sort of in this oddball thing. So, but just some things to consider when you're thinking about doing that. And again, I'm not the expert. I don't know.
On both points. On the first point, we have a committee that meets on planning for a conference, and they can do that. As long as we're not proposing resolutions, that I think that's perfectly permissible. Secondly, yes, Linda, we do tend to forget our friends at the state college, right? Which nonetheless also is hybrid in the sense that you do university degrees, and as you point out, up to including some graduate degrees. So what would you like to do? Would you like to join us or be kept informed?
Sure. I don't know that I want to put another meeting on my agenda, but I do, we're a college, but we're the state's public online college, and we only award up to master's degrees. We're small. We probably won't ever be a university or one of the CSUs because we're small,
But we're happy to have you.
Yeah, can I just ask Linda? There's not any kind of governance connected body through Charter Oak, right? So it's not like there's a president or a faculty president or a faculty representative that we can invite. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct at all. We do have a faculty governance body. We've had that since we were formed as since we first became a teaching institution. I mean, I know we were created as a state agency, and I can't cite the year, became a teaching institution, and we've always had faculty governance bodies, and I don't know that it's called the president, it might be called chair, but we definitely have a role. In fact, Patrice, who's on, who's here, served in that role at one time. I don't think she's still in that capacity, but she's served in that role at one time.
Well,
So
I just want to second David's remark that I think we should invite you and anybody who's in that kind of position that's equivalent to a curriculum chair or a Senate president. So if you could let us know who those people are, that would be very helpful.
I think that's a great idea, Mike. Thanks. And I'll send those names to you because honestly, I'd have to look them up. They, change every few years.
Yeah, this is Patrice. So I was dean of the core faculty, and that was the governance, and I was also chair of the academic committee.
Thank you.
I think that concludes then the report of the vice chair. The next item on the agenda is FAC elections. We hold these elections, and I am now at a loss for exactly when. I think our terms go to January of 2024, if I'm correct, Kalina. But that we should do an election in the fall for chair, vice chair, and secretary. Is that correct? And is your proposal to have an elections committee?
We have
Yes.
We-
Okay.
So if the universities could elect who they want to put forward, y'all are all set. And Jen, Lois, and I are going to handle the community colleges. We'll start sending out emails next week.
Okay. Well, maybe when we get together, the 4 university reps, we can talk about that next week. And sort of double our function there.
I guess we need to either send somebody or be there then if we're going to talk about elections.
You would just elect Charter Oak, right? Each of the universities in Charter Oak are easy. You just elect who you want to put forward.
Yeah, Charter Oak is separate.
Yeah, it's the community colleges has like a multi-step process, and that's why it's more complicated. But you guys can just handle it at your own institutions.
Except the community college is going to totally change July 1 and be one college. So I guess you all are going to discuss what changes are taking place there for elections and for, I guess, then would need to be put into bylaws. I mean, we're in a tough position time-wise, I guess.
We still have the different campuses, right? So wouldn't we keep the process the same in that regard, or?
Is the process stipulated in section 185 of the state statutes, or is it just in our bylaws?
Oh, sorry. Lois has her hand up, sorry.
This is a legislative committee, and the bylaws are what are, no, I'm sorry, the bylaws are separate, but the legislative committee talks about the 12 colleges, so that would have to change legislatively, not.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Not
they would have
anything
to,
we
in
do.
section 185, also change the name of the Community Technical College System to the CSCC. So there are some modifications that they actually have to make to section 185. And we have not seen any information, have we, on name changes, what each community college campus will be called, whether they keep their name or have some hyphenated name or something else. We have no information on that, do we?
They haven't made any changes to the legislation, and until they do, it is what it is.
Yes, okay. Well, we'll continue to function on that basis. And there's no proposals. Mike Shea?
Yeah, I just want to add to the fact that just a reminder too, that when we elect the people in the fall, we've often invited them to come to the fall meetings as a way of transitioning into learning about a little bit of the procedures and business of the FAC, so that when they enter in as full members in January, they've had a little bit of experience. So I just wanted to remind us of, we don't have to do that, but when the people are elected, we've invited them to, if they wanted to attend. Is that other people kind of remember that approach? And I think that might help smooth the transition into, because it's odd beginning in January. instead of at the beginning of the school year. So I think if we use that fall semester to help people become a little acclimated to what the business is and how it proceeds at here, that might be good for them. Thanks.
Yes, I recall having come to the December meeting, I think, at the very least, which is one of the few meetings before. I think it was December, then January, then February, but by March we were remote with in the COVID pandemic. Okay, the feedback discussion on the program, academic program review. This is an interesting challenge for us. Again, this is an outcome of our regular meeting, but it's more like a discussion with Provost Katuria. And it's quite clear that there is a change in attitude, and a significant one, from what was the view of the previous assistant provost. And I think that's consistent with a lot of changes that we're seeing at the level of leadership in the CSU system and at the Board of Regents. That said, the request is that we give some feedback, and we can, have a preliminary discussion now. And what I would like to do is to have maybe a more elaborate discussion come our next meeting, if necessary. But you've all received it. I'm going to put it up. And Kalina, could you just look and see who asked to speak? Because as soon as I put this up, I can't see anything on my screen. So I'm going to share it. Where is it? I hope this is right. Are you seeing academic program review template?
Yes, but it's very, very small. Too small to read.
Okay, let's see if I can make this larger. How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
I might be able to get it a tiny bit bigger. Okay. So the idea here is, as they're trying to make sense, I guess, of what has happened to the programs at the universities, and it's even more complicated for the community colleges given alignment. There's an effort underway to have a common form. Now, it might be one specific to the universities, one specific to the community colleges, perhaps even, given what Linda has just said, something specific to Charter Oak. That's something that we, should discuss. But the idea then is that there should be, or the request is to get our input onto what would become a common informational template for program review. Now, I think that's approximately every 5 years. And as you can, this is what we received from Ray Katuria, who has asked for our input. This hasn't been shared with the universities yet, and he's indicated that he would like first to have the viewpoint of the faculty advisory committee. So that's an interesting challenge for us. What we can do today is have a presentation and at least a preliminary discussion, and then depending on whether we want to or not, have a further discussion with specific proposals for any modifications at our May meeting. This is a project which would be intended really for discussion at the universities and the community college in the fall of 2023. So we're getting an advanced look at it. So let me just do a quick presentation. It's quite elaborate, and that may be one of its drawbacks. But nonetheless, there is the first section on overview, program description, mission statement, enrollment. And I think initially, when we first saw it, Kalina and I, it only had students in the major. And, my immediate comment, and just into a very preliminary discussion, was we needed to have also the number of minors, which can be significant in a program, and also the number of students in general education courses specific to that discipline. And so that's been added in. And that's, I think, indicative of the fact that we can actually make changes to this if we see fit. Section D here is in curriculum. This is fairly straightforward. Degree and certificate options, course requirements, instructional modalities, i.e. Online, on-ground, hybrid. This is perhaps interesting. Program pathways to or from program, including stackable credentials, if any. That would seem to apply more specifically to the community colleges. And this is one reason that might be that we want two forms, one for the community colleges, one for the universities. Although there might be so-called stackable credentials at the universities, which could be combined together to form part of the requirements for a degree. I learned what stackable credentials are because I'd heard this and I just thought it was just another buzzword. I didn't pay much attention, but correct me if I am wrong. These would be certificate programs which can be used as transfer to degree programs. So the courses would count and would be transferred. So almost like a transfer articulation agreement. The second thing here is goals. So we have here the two famous ASLOs and ESLOs. And this is new terminology for me. I will share it with you. Statement of Academic Student Learning Outcomes. What is interesting, and which I think is something we should discuss further, is Statement of Employability and or Transfer Student Learning Outcomes. And I'm not sure that this is something that programs have been doing up to now. It would be worth having a discussion about this. I'm not sure, for example, how a philosophy department, say mine, would have employability, although that might be, going on for graduate work and eventually finding a tenure track position. So that's something to look into, and I draw your attention to it because that would be something I think new. So this is in goals. I'm going to just highlight it. Can't. Yeah. Mapping of curriculum to outcomes. That's a complication. I imagine some programs do this as a matter of course, others as a matter of assumption, but that would be included in the goals. Section 3 is infrastructure, and I think this is fairly straightforward. List of faculty and staff, including qualifications, teaching loads, and other work responsibilities. That's not problem. That's straightforward. Fiscal resources, a departmental budget, and other funds, including research grants, I imagine. Facilities, including library and other educational resources. Specialized equipment and or materials, external partnerships, if applicable. I think that's fairly straightforward. Is there somebody who wanted to say something? Lois?
I'm sorry, I'm unmuted and I do want to say something, but I'll hold off for the time being.
Oh, okay, because there's a lot more to go, so you're gonna have to wait for a few minutes if I go through the whole thing. So you can always interrupt me. Operations, program governance and administrative support, student advising, faculty and staff development activities, faculty and department contributions and teaching, research, creative activities, scholarly work, and service. That I think has been missing, certainly at the level of the universities in our annual reports. Some years ago, at least at my university, they dropped any reference to research, publications, and so forth, and looked at it strictly from a teaching and eventually community engagement point of view. So this is adding here research, creative activities, scholarly work is significant. Processes to support continuous program development or improvement. Again, faculty review of the curriculum, alignment and adequate assessment of course and program student learning outcomes, and use of ALSLO and ESLO data to update curricula and or pedagogy. That assumes that this kind of a data, and in particular the ESLO data, the employment data, is available. Efforts to address previously identified opportunity gaps, and then other, if applicable, curricular and co-curricular contributions to college university programs. I think that's actually an important one because there is a tendency to see a program review as just the program, but if the program also has links to other programs. For example, I'll take the example of my philosophy department. We have a course on moral issues, which is required of students in the criminal justice program. We have had in the past other courses which were required in other departments. A course on computer ethics, which used to be required for the computer science honors degree. And I think that would include that would be included in this curricular contributions to college university programs, other than the program under assessment, I presume, but that might need to be clarified. Contributions to diversity and cultural proficiency, outreach activities and service to the institution, the profession, and the community, alumni and business and industry fundraising, contributions to general education curriculum, and collaborations with other CSU institutions and other CT colleges and universities. So we continue on, and this is quite elaborate. Outcomes, student access, retention, completion, and post-completion success. And they ask for a disaggregate by gender, race, Pell status, ethnicity, and school district. Again, that assumes that a department would have access to that information. I'm pretty clear on the fact that, for example, in my university, we would not have access necessarily to gender, race, Pell status, and ethnicity. And school district, that would be something that would be there in the registrar's records, perhaps. Low completer report if applicable. Again, results of assessment of academic student learning outcomes, disaggregated by, again, gender, race, Pell status, and ethnicity. The employability and transfer student learning outcomes, the same thing there. So this would be an additional requirement beyond what I think most program reviews up to now have done. Safety and adequacy of physical facilities, fairly straightforward, although in some cases it may be problematic. Sustainability of human and financial resources to maintain a quality program. Student, alumni, employer, and other relevant constituent feedback, including the number of students going to graduate school. And that would be of interest to see whether, for example, at the universities, now this is specifically an element for the universities, whether in fact the alumni office is in fact keeping track of this. I wonder. Factors affecting the program and other, and there's some repetition here, research, peer feedback, including external reviewers. That's in the past been quite an important item. And having an external reviewer come and supply a report has been a standard part of university program assessments for some time. Research, which is repetition, national trends, which could be interesting to situate, for example, the number of majors in a particular program relative to the average number of majors of universities of the same type, relativized for size at other institutions. Program involvement of business industry, economic impact of the state of Connecticut. Of course, that's all the interest in, and that would apply more to some programs than others. Obviously, it applies more to business than, say, to the humanities. And then finally, appraisal, the extent to which the program goals, objectives, and student learning outcomes are aligned with the mission of the institution, the mission of the CSU system, the extent to which students achieve the stated SLOs and employability transfer outcomes, discussion of student success metrics, once again, access, retention, progression, completion, and post-completion, how assessment and program data are used for continuous improvement. So this is sort of summarizing and repeating items which are previously in this program assessment form, how assessment and program data are used for continuous improvement, the quality of the program infrastructure and resources, the value of the program to students, the institutions, the CSU system, the state of CT. So that seems to be sort of a repetition of particular items already dealt with previously. And then executive summary and action plan, program strengths and challenges, at least 3 goals for program improvement, resources needed for program improvement. So here's where I guess we would be asking for additional lines, additional support for equipment and so forth. key stakeholders responsible for implementing improvement goals, timeline for program improvements. And here are underlined here. These are not broken up into further things, but the DEI initiatives unique to the degree. So that's a diversity, equity, and inclusion. Community engagement, number 9. External reviewers advisory committee report. That's obviously quite important. And it's a rather complicated and time-consuming activity, which requires a certain outlay on the part of the university to bring in an external assessor. And response from institution, administration, leadership, I, the dean and the provost. So that is quite a mouthful here. There are some new items, at least I can see, some degree of repetition, particularly in the final appraisal. But I'll leave that for discussion. And I think, Lois, you had a comment that you wanted to make to start off with?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. First of all, I think it's kind of way over the top. And second of all, scroll down to the bottom there where it says executive summary and action plan. You need to have at least 3 goals for program improvement. That implies that your program absolutely needs improvement. That kind of bothers me. And I think I need more time to look at this and compare it to what we've.
Yes. That's why what I'm doing here is just a presentation to draw it to everybody's attention. Because, you know, we all get so many things as email attachments that it's normal that, you know, we pay cursory attention. But this is something where we can, in fact, make proposals. For example, Lois, if you think that it's overly complicated and drawn out, we can propose, but then we'd have to be more specific, ways in which this could be contracted to make it a bit more manageable. Your question about the 3 goals for program improvement, I know my colleagues at the university level will always say, well, we need more lines, we need more money, right? And we need more support from the administration. That would be pro forma, but there might be more specific things that people would mention.
Hey,
Go ahead.
yeah, I just want to ask that. So if possible, like we can return to it next month, but I know that Dr. Kathuria wants to get it out and really wanted to make sure that we have eyes on it to make sure that he hasn't missed anything glaring, nothing's tone deaf, right? Like that kind of thing. And if we can, and we've had it for, you know, a little bit now, I haven't heard anything back from any of you. If the feeling is that this is good to at least circulate, and we can always, because we will have other opportunities to put in, to do input. If you think of anything that is a glaring sort of omission or issue, even Lois, we can make the suggestion that, you know, right before the areas of improvement, it asks whether it needs, you know, whether there are strengths or weaknesses. So if weaknesses, then what areas of, you know, that could be some immediate input. But if we could try to just sort of brainstorm now and get some emails to us, to David and I, by the end of the day, we could at least give him that assurance that he's not sending out something that'll come back, you know, with a harsh response.
Okay, Brendan and then Andre. Good point, Kalina.
Based upon some email I've received, I don't know that I would reassure anyone that you won't get a harsh response. But I would say that from my perspective, and I could be wrong about this, where we're starting from was a very, very bare bones program review process. I believe almost entirely relying upon this low completer thing. And I'm glad we kind of went through this new version because I had missed that it was kind of still there. So I am glad that they're looking at a more complete set of metrics in order to consider the contributions of different disciplines and faculty to what we're trying to achieve. One question I would have is is low completer now subsumed within this, or is low completer still going to be considered outside of this in isolation? That would, because the board really seemed to rely upon low completer almost exclusively prior to this. Again, I could be wrong, but that's what it looked like to me. And then the other reaction I had to it was I just don't understand why schooling, like lifetime learning, like going to a master's or a PhD program, gets zero weight in this, right? So like I think we do try to create lifetime learners, and um, it's fine if someone wants to go and just get a job and just do that for the rest of their lives, but I don't think we would want to say someone that decides to get a job and then get a master's or a PhD and then go back to work is somehow like less of an achievement because they weren't employed for as long. So, that it just seems like a big omission to me that you would just, not even try to measure whether, programs are contributing to ongoing study and learning by students. I don't know exactly how you put that into this framework, and it is hard to measure. But some programs do keep in touch with students that go on to get PhDs and masters. So at least give them the opportunity to express that that's happening, I would think. And that's all I had on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's important. Andre? I think you're still muted. Andre, you're muted. No, still. You're indicated as unmuted here, but we're not being able to hear you. No, still nothing. You want to put something in the chat room? I think it's somehow in your computer. You're probably on a PC and there's some linkage that the good folks at Microsoft have made as an
Now,
option.
can you hear me?
There we go. Yes.
Okay. Just had to reset the microphone. Yeah, I agree with the previous statement about we do want to try to redefine success because unfortunately it's only in terms of how many graduates and how many people got employed, but students come in for all kinds of purposes. They have different kinds of goals. Some of it is just simply to learn, and to me, success should be more related to what the students actually want to do. What are their goals, and whether we satisfy them. But that's a big topic. I have a simple question that somebody may have answered, or the answer is too obvious. But if the one community college is going to be doing program reviews now, I presume these programs will be involved. The reviews will involve several campuses or all the campuses at once. I'm just wondering how practically that will work. I mean, I've done several program reviews and accreditation, studies and all that. But I really can't imagine how I would do the same with programs in 12 different colleges, or a program that has 12 different colleges. How the hell would that work?
Huh. That's a good
practically.
question.
Well,
Yes,
we don't have
there's
to-
two things that have come up here. One is specific for the universities. Mary Beth, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, I mean, I don't think anybody quite knows how that's going to work yet, but there is a curriculum council, which is all representatives from each of the campuses. And there's also program specific, or I guess college specific. So like science and math, and then business and humanities, or whatever the colleges are. So I'm assuming that all these different system-wide, like for all 12 colleges groups, I think the program reviews would happen in one of those groups. I don't know if it would, I assume it would happen like within the college group first, and then that would filter up to the curriculum committee to look at it. I don't think anybody really knows yet, but we do have like all these new committees, and I think that's, I'm assuming, the place where that kind of stuff would happen.
Do you have a committee specific to each discipline, which would be college-wide, including all members of that particular discipline?
So we do have committees for each discipline, but there's a representative from each campus on that committee. So it's not all, right? So like I teach math, but I'm not on the math committee. There's another representative from my campus who's on that committee. But each campus does have a representative for each program or area.
Well, that indicates, you know, one of the differences between what's going on at the universities and what's going on at the community colleges in this transition period. Presumably at the university, in a department, even a fairly large department, say math or English, everybody would be involved in this input. Whereas at the community college, it might only be representatives. So that's one issue that I think is here, which is, will one form and one format suffice for both the community colleges and the universities? Also, because you have a different kind of transfer consideration, right? At the community colleges, you presumably want to know how many students transferred to the universities. At the universities, we also want to know how many students went on for further graduate or professional studies. So those are slightly different. But that's good. Let's have this is the kind of conversation we wanted to have, and pointing out, you know, some of the difficulties and problems. I agree with Lois. This is really complicated, right? And it would be sort of interesting, or perhaps helpful, to have it somewhat more abbreviated.
Well, I'm not interested in learning that stuff. I can avoid doing it.
Yes, well, and the other point which I want to make is we need to really insist that this is information gathered to the system office, right? But it is not for them to decide consequent upon it whether a program is continued, discontinued, supported or not. That's up to the institution, right? And we've had this discussion during the Ojakian period when there was an effort to have the board, particularly for low enrollment programs, have some deciding power whether it be continued or not. And I think that's not appropriate, and it's something we need to insist here in a preamble. What is the purpose and what is the uses to which this program assessment will be put? It certainly makes sense to me that the system office, as any coordinating body, needs to have information about what's going on. And I think at this point, they're operating slightly in the less illuminated parts of the world. Let's put it that way. And so our cooperation with them and to improve the form would be helpful. But let's have a clear preamble as to why this is being done, right? And how it's to be used. And insisting upon the base institution having deciding power as to what happens. It's not the ASA committee or the system office, or for that matter, the board, which is going to say, let's have 2 more lines for, you know, the English program at Southern, right? That's up to the university and its administrative and faculty and shared governance instances to determine. So that's one thing that I would add. Sort of a prefatory statement to clear up how this is going to be used, why it's important, and how it's going to be used. Are there other comments? I think we have a few already now. So this has been, I think, a good discussion. And as Colina suggested, would you send us, you know, even a particular item? Obviously, you know, one that I'm going to talk about is the employability, the learning outcomes, ESLOs. I have really no idea what that might be. Presumably a student having done a degree at a university has now increased their options for employability. There's then the question, what is specific in their major to the employment that they wish to undertake? but that could be rather variable, right? Even for a business student. I mean, they might want to go into an NGO. They might want to go and work for the Peace Corps. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're anxious and focused on working for Electric Boat. Although I hear that, for example, Electric Boat hired 1/3 of the graduating engineers from UConn. So that's, in some cases, it's a direct route to employability with a specific employer. But in other cases, it's pretty general. And, speaking for a philosophy department, we've had students who've become organic farmers and university professors. There's a lot of variability. Andre?
Yeah, at Tuxas, we did this abilities-based education project for 15 years. And it took us about 15 years to get comfortable with it. And then, of course, the whole thing was scratched because of the merger. But the thing is that we got to the point where, in fact, we're turning that question around, saying, okay, so which abilities are indeed, what's the word, important for what kinds of employment and all that. So that will be the next phase of that work. But like I said, we were told to go home and forget it.
Well, that's encouraging.
Well, we got to start from scratch. It's going to take us some 30 years to get there.
Yeah, I think this is that little employability student learning outcome. It's just one little item, but even assuming that Andre has exaggerated by a factor of 2, nonetheless, departments will be working for more than a decade to figure that one item out. So let's have some further elucidation and clarification on that particular issue. Are there other comments? If not, the next item on the agenda was the proposed resolution in support of curricular norms at EXU at Eastern. But Brendan, I think, have we sort of satisfied that with the discussion we've had with the provost and the proposed having your provost go to the next ASA meeting to straighten this whole thing out?
I think that piece of it, there's been progress on that. There's a couple of other pieces of it in the resolution that I think are still sort of.
Okay, let me put up the resolution now then, so we can take a look at it. Share. Can you see it now? Is it large enough? Okay, so it says, whereas in contravention to prevailing norms, 2 recent curricular proposals at Eastern Connecticut State University were reviewed by the Board of Regents prior to completion of the university review of said proposals, whereas this deviation from process norms deprives the Board of Regents of valuable information pertaining to local faculty views regarding said proposals, whereas members of the public have applied for admission to a degree program when the program has not yet been approved through either the established curricular processes at the university or the Board of Regents, whereas the Eastern Senate Academic Affairs Committee was not asked to review or provide feedback on whether Eastern should solicit admissions applications to an unapproved program at the university, whereas the administration at Eastern blocked an email service and refused to remove the block even when they were notified that it would uniquely interfere with communication to Eastern's faculty. That's something new that I wasn't aware of. Whereas the block prohibited Eastern faculty from nominating colleagues for statewide officer positions, AAP, until faculty accidentally discovered that the right to the franchise had been hindered. Therefore, be it resolved that the FAC supports the faculty at Eastern and their fight to a broad-based, deliberative, and norm-based curricular review process. That FAC believes capricious violation of norms demoralizes faculty and leads to their disengagement from shared governance. That the FAC acknowledges that the risk to the public from solicitation of applications to unapproved academic programs, and that such programs run counter to campus and BOR oversight of curriculum. That the FAC encourages the Board of Regents to review curricular processes only after campus review of curricular proposals has been completed. That point seems to now be accepted. That the FAC rejects any block of communication to faculty that infringes upon their right to a franchise in union matters. That's an item that we hadn't discussed. So perhaps, Brendan, you could elaborate more on that particular issue.
Sure. There are sort of many layers to that aspect of things, but at some point, our IT department blocked essentially a website, but also a website you can use to send email called actionnetwork.org. It's a fairly well-established platform for a variety of purposes. A lot of different sort of advocacy groups use it, and AAUP in Connecticut had used it for statewide communication down to the chapter members. So when they blocked that service, it limited the ability of our statewide union officers to reach Eastern's faculty in particular. We warned the administration that this was a possibility. There was a very lengthy letter from our statewide union president to our administration indicating that they should end the block, and the rationale for their block was not actually grounded in the claims that were made. Then at some point, the statewide office sent out an email soliciting nominations for our officer elections for next year. And the other 3 campuses, faculty on those campuses, received that email calling for nominations. Our faculty did not, because the service had been blocked. And of course, the problem with an email block is you don't know what you're missing. So eventually, through communication with a couple of other chapter presidents, we discovered that AAUP members on our campus were not even aware that a call for nominations that had gone out. And so we kind of scrambled to remedy that and make sure our faculty were able to nominate people if they wanted to these positions on a timely basis. I think there's been some other communication our faculty missed regarding advocating for resources, lobbying at the General Assembly. So, to increase operating budgets and that sort of thing. We don't know what we've missed. We're trying to sort of piece that together. And so eventually, when we did point out that the franchise had been compromised, in fact, on campus, you could not even access the contract because it was stored on the same website. In any event, when we finally pointed out for the second time that now faculty had a compromised franchise, they finally unblocked the service. But it certainly does not set a good precedent, or it's not something I think any faculty would want to have happen to them. So I don't know, is that enough background, David? Or
Yes, I mean, so this was an external email source outside of the exu.edu. Is that correct?
yeah, it's called actionnetwork.org, and the union, I don't know the historical reasons, but had set up email, the essentially if, let's say, the statewide president of the union wanted to contact all the faculty across the state, they would use that platform to do it.
Okay, and I'm sure we've gotten those emails at Central. And do you know at whose directive or request this site was blocked? Presumably the administration.
Yeah, I don't know who was advocating for it. I mean, I know that our CIO was the one who actually pulled the plug on the site and provided the rationale for why. But again, I don't know that rationale was completely well-founded. Because there's more background to this, even
Yes.
beyond this, but I don't know if it's helpful to get into that
Okay.
at this point, but I'm happy to if people want to spend their time that way. So.
Well, the question is, there's actually 2 aspects to your resolution, right? One is the situation. Now, you mentioned 2 programs. The one program that we're aware of was the nursing program. Is there a second program as well that was sent to the ASA before being approved by the University Senate?
Yes, it was a master's program involving think it was organizational management, I want to say. That program was already established, so it was a program modification rather than establishing a program from the beginning. But it was the same issue that our local process for finalizing the campus approval of that modification had not
Was-
completed before it went to the BOR subcommittee.
Now, do you want us to vote on this resolution now?
I see Andre has his hand up, and I don't know if
Oh,
people
I'm sorry.
wanna-
Yes, because again, let me go back. I'm sorry, because when I have this up, I can't do anything. Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, this business about blocking the site that the union was using, that to me sounds like they're interfering with union, with the union being able to operate. So did anybody think about contacting the NLRB, because they might be interested in that kind of issue? Because it does seem like a violation of of the National Labor Relations Act. They're interfering with communication for the union, so that's a problem. The other thing is that we have had similar kind of issue, although not quite in that context, but they have the CEO at our campus has made it very difficult for our governance body or our officers to contact all the members of the governance body by email. You have to ask permission every time we do so. And I don't think we should be asking permission. We should be given a blank, but that's another just related issue. Thanks.
Okay. I see Pam Helene, did you have your hand up for this particular item?
I did. Brendan, I'm just trying to take quick notes. What was the second program again? A master's, and it was a program mod. What was the program?
Pam, can I send that to you
Yes,
after?
please.
I don't have the exact title.
I want to
I'm
track
glad-
it down and make sure our documentation is complete.
Yeah, I can get that to you, and that's kind of tied into. I mean, I did not have close eyes on all of these things happening, but there's been a lot of email discussion. Another faculty member raised this question of changes to sequencing in terms of program modification or new program approvals. And then our Senate president actually pointed out that there was one prior to this one, this management master's degree that seemed to also change the process.
Okay.
I forwarded the Senate president's email to David and Kalina, and one faculty member did say he would like to see the Senate president's email attached to the resolution. There's some other issues surrounding that email, but again, we can get into that.
You and I can talk later, but I appreciate
Okay.
the follow-up. That would be super. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, now the question is, how do we wish to proceed? Do you want to move it as a motion, Brendan? Or do you want to simply to have the FAC receive it as information?
I'd leave it to the colleagues here how they want to proceed, and you, David, and Kalina, based upon what you're reading. Like, I don't have as much context for how something like this goes. I know we did something. It wasn't exactly the same, but Western had a
Yes.
resolution relating to what was happening there. So,
Okay.
Since
So
it's an FA,
why don't you just move it as a resolution, and then we can have any amendments and then have the vote?
okay, I'll move it as a resolution then.
I second.
Andre, second. And the only thing I would suggest as an amendment is in the therefore be it resolved that the FAC encourages the Board of Regents to continue to review curricular processes only after the campus review of curricular proposal has been completed, as is now being implemented. Just to take into account the discussion we've had with Ray Couturier. On the question of communication, that's a new issue, and I think that's a significant one. So I'll just move that as an amendment.
I agree.
is there any other discussion on this? Not seeing any, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. Abstentions? 2. Okay. Thank you. So that passes with votes in favor, no votes opposed, and 2 abstentions. Now let me see if I can find the rest of the agenda. The next item is Chair Governance Award Committee volunteers. Is that committee, is that Shared Governance Award still out there, Kalina? And are we looking for volunteers to serve on a committee to adjudicate the applications? And do we have any volunteers for said function? I see Mike Shea is looking like we're looking at him. Do we have somebody from the community colleges? I think a committee of 2 people would suffice for this particular aspect. And it's so complicated when it comes to the community colleges, right? Because we're in this transition period from yes, Pam.
Just to let you know, we have 2 nominations, one from the universities and one from the community college. And that is it. So I'm not sure that the lift is going to be huge. And I'm waiting for nominations from Chair Ryan on 2 regents to sit with the FAC for consideration.
And how many, sorry, I missed that. How many nominations do you have so far?
2.
One
One
from
from the university?
One from the
and one from-
university, one from the community college.
Uh-huh. And we give 2 awards.
No, 1 award.
1 award. Oh boy.
Yes.
Okay, Mike,
I'm-
have we got you?
I'm willing to tackle that.
All right. One other person.
Check the chat.
Kalina, do you have a suggestion of someone?
Selena put in the chat that Mike Shea and Brian should not participate because of a conflict of interest.
Oh. Okay, I can't read the chat for some reason.
All right, well,
I can't
I'm
read it.
at a slight loss here. If we don't have any volunteers at this point, all we can do is ask for someone to suggest to us. Andre, did you have your hand up? You're volunteering?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right.
What else is? I'd rather not, but hey, what the hell? There's only
All
2
right.
applications. That's all right.
All right, one more person. So university
Can I
person?
just ask, Kalina, is the conflict of interest the fact that Southern is one of the nominations? I can't see. Hold on.
Yeah, well, it must be.
Is Southern
Yes.
one of the nominees?
Yes.
Really? That's really interesting because usually I'm involved in the Senate and I would think that I would have known about that. That's interesting. Well, I'm glad they are, but I didn't. I'm surprised I didn't know about it. But thank you.
Are you volunteering?
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Okay, great. Well, Kalina and Pam, we have success here. So we have a small committee. Okay,
Brendan, I'll send you some money to vote for Southern. Okay.
now you got a real conflict of interest here. Publicly available. We'll edit the tape. Don't worry. Okay, number 8. Oh, this is not a small item. Fall 2023 registration at the community colleges discussion. So our presumption here, whether we agree with it or not, whether we acquiesce or concede, is that the NESHE will authorize the creation of the one community college for July 1st. In that case, the amalgamation of all of the services, which I presume is in process, will have to be done, and that must be particularly complicated. I can only imagine trying to put all of the databases together. This has been a harrowing experience in other areas when people try to do this. Even if the databases are in the same format, the classification terms may be different. The way things are entered, first name, comma, last name, or last name, comma, first name may be different. Andre, go ahead.
Yeah, these are all minor problems. The bigger problem is that nobody, how should I put it? Nobody's in charge. Nobody knows who's in charge. There is no, I mean, it's an unholy mess. People are not sure who's supposed to be doing what. It's just, I mean, whoever actually is responsible for this transition should be fired, drawn, and quartered, because it's a mess. I mean, the advising, for instance, you got the pathway advisors. They're not sure what they're supposed to do about, for instance, all the different substitutions they're going to have to happen, because all of a sudden, lots of colleges, the programs are not what they used to be. All of a sudden, students find out that they thought they had only a couple of courses to graduate. Now they got 10. I mean, it's a huge mess. And, and on top of that, the people that are in power, they don't seem to care about the students much either. It's like, well, they'll just have to do it. It's a disaster.
Lois?
Um,
And then Jonathan.
The schedule itself is a disaster. It looks like it's built on some kind of 1985 software. And they never, until we said something to them, they didn't realize that if you're using a Mac or you're using a tablet or using a phone, some of the stuff they have doesn't even work. And we at Norwalk have a lot of blended credit, non-credit courses, and what they've done, the whole thing is a total disaster. It's beyond a disaster. If our enrollment doesn't tank completely between what's going on with the schedule itself, what's going on with advising, and what's going on with the competitive application programs like physical therapy and respiratory care and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, our enrollment is going to tank like crazy. It's a total freaking disaster. They have no idea what they're doing. They don't care what they're doing. It just keeps getting worse and worse. In order to cross-list the non-credit with the credit courses, those non-credit courses that are cross-listed had to go on the credit schedule website, and they're not on the non-credit schedule website. So this has never happened before. We've been doing this for years and years and years and years, and it's always worked without a problem. Now it's a total freaking disaster. I don't know what more to say than that. In my worst nightmares, I could not come up with this.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of problems, and it seems as if a new problem or many more new problems emerge every day, coming across our email. So, and speaking to Lois's point about the software, it's easy to dismiss, when you bring up, how difficult it is to look for a course or browse for a courses, you're quibbling about, minor aesthetics or technical issues, but it's actually, really visually difficult to just, from a student perspective, to browse the courses, start figuring out a schedule, what bumps up against what, and we have a fine interface right now. And small things are big things, and potentially, I think, disastrous things. When students can't find schedules, it's easy for many of our community college students to give up. Michael Moore has an anecdote, and whatever you think of Michael Moore, he talks about his first or his attempt to go to college, and he drives to the community college at Flint, and he drives around and around and around, and there are no parking spaces, and he drives off and he never goes to college. You know, that's that many of our students, it doesn't take much at all to kind of push them their small handholds off. So that's a you know, that small thing is a big thing. And then there are big things like degree works. So we just looked at Pathway to Teaching Careers degree works, and it's not even close. I mean, you know, it's not even close. I don't even understand how that degree works for Pathway to Teaching Careers associate's degree was populated that way. Like someone was just making it up or putting in placeholders to get back to later. And now there's a form that was sent via, one of the emails coming from CT State for faculty to be aware and fill out this form of any discrepancies that they find between their degree and the new CT State degree works. But that, you know, that's an embedded thing in small print in one of, you know, feels like 100 CT State emails that are coming through. And so these big important things are going to be easily missed. So yeah, I just want to kind of second those and just kind of say the small things are big things and the big things are big things.
Just add with degree works, not only are there inaccuracies in the programs, also the data's coming in incomplete. It's incomplete. So from one day to the next, information changes. Students are trying to make choices. There's no, and they have access to constantly changing and inaccurate information. So they are freaking out. And our GPAs have to deal with them and explain, and it's not clear actually what the actual progression towards the degree is. So it's unnecessary chaos at a very chaotic time already. It was, I think, deployed too early.
Mike Emanuel, what is happening at the Northwest Community College, which is one of the smaller, in fact, the smallest?
We're running into similar, hold on, let me get to a little better. It's been cutting in and out. We're running into similar problems where the old degree works better than the new degree works. And the necessary required courses are not showing up. So we're have to do course substitutions, but we're finding them every day, like everybody's saying, in terms of not populating, and then some students signing up for courses they already took. It's kind of it's problematic, and every time we find something we report it, but there's still a lot of bugs in it, obviously. But yeah, a lot of the GPAs are pulling their hair out.
I wonder how much money we paid somebody to do this to us.
It's a Lucian.
Yes. Well, I'm at a loss to say what we can do. We can certainly bring this up at the next board meeting, that we have had input from community colleges, large, medium, and small, that there is a situation where, and I like the formulation, small problems are big ones and big problems are big ones, and it looks like a chaotic situation. What steps are being taken to normalize this?
There are no steps being taken to normalize this. None. Zero.
Andre?
Yeah, the problem is that I don't think they can fix it, because they would have to fire half their staff because they're just incompetent. I mean, I'm sorry. Before I was teaching, I actually worked as a operations person, and I know how that should be done, and doesn't resemble anything what they are doing. I mean, you kind of have to, get to understand the total process and all the people in it, and then you begin to design the transition. None of that has been done. These people are totally, utterly incompetent. So what are you going to do with them? Teach them how to do it better? Not possible. They can only be fired and replaced by somebody. Of course, again, what? You're going to pay another $500,000 to some consultant to come in? It's not, it's a problem that's basically going to be with us for a while. We're just going to have to, probably the best thing to do is go to paper system. But we have to be living with this and trying to resolve students' problems one by one, which means a hell of a lot more work than it should be. But that's the only thing we can do. Appealing to the board to do something about it is, I think, futile. They can't. They're too stupid to understand what the problem is, and they're not going to fire everybody. Okay, so I can give them a list of the people that should be fired, but I don't think they'll want to. I don't think they would appreciate that.
Could I ask that those of you at the community colleges, forward to Kalina a brief email statement of the problems as you see them, so that we can tabulate this, all right? Lois and then Mike.
I just want to say that I agree with Andre, there's nothing that can be done, and they didn't pre-test anything. As I said, we had to tell them that the schedule wasn't working on a Mac or on a tablet. They didn't know this. When we notified them, they came back. You know what they came back with? Yikes. Yikes, we didn't know this. They didn't pre-test anything. So how do you deal with people like this? And it still doesn't work. It still doesn't work. I found mistakes in the catalog in January that are still not fixed. Everything they put their fingers on turns into a huge disaster.
Mike?
Two things. I would say one is, are students complaining about this? And if they should, direct their complaints to the system office if they do. And I mean, I'm not saying only to them, but to them so that they see that. Well, I'm going to say something else, but what you were going to say, Andre?
Well, no, I don't think we should be asking students to go and complain, because ultimately they're the ones that suffer more.
I know. That's why they should.
So we're standing on our heads to try to, in fact, shield the students from the consequences of this lunacy. I don't think. I think it would be really, really bad in terms of, what's the word? Our reputation to actually, let the students try to solve this problem, because I think we want to. We want. I think we ought to shield them from this nonsense.
Okay.
So they don't know how horrible it is.
I get that, but I do think I wouldn't agree with your earlier point that it's useless to talk to the board. I think Kalina and David ought to bring it to the board, and I think there ought to be, student examples. I think they might not care, but I don't think we should assume they don't care until we find out that they don't care. But they clearly don't want this to not work, right? So I think we should at least let them know about it and see what they do.
Well, it's like Microsoft, they put out the product and then let the customers do the debugging. It's the same thing, same principle. So I think eventually it'll get straightened out. It's going to take a hell of a lot of our work and a lot of suffering by students, and so I don't think complaining to them is going to work, because these people are too stupid to understand the problem. They're not intelligent. I'm sorry.
But the board members might understand it if Kalina and David were to explain it to them.
Board members, are you sure? Because
no, I'm not sure. I'm just saying they might. We don't know. I just wouldn't assume that they can't understand it and therefore not tell them. I would tell them and then say, "Oh my God, they don't understand," but they might understand. So
possible.
I'm just saying that if we want it to get better, we'll find out if they're competent or incompetent. I agree with you that the programmers are incompetent. Doesn't mean the board won't understand the problem and how bad that is for the reputation.
Mike, I agree with you. I think what you're hearing is the despair that it's not clear that anything can be fixed. We jumped on a leaky raft and then lit the boat on fire. The boat's gone. So now we just have to figure this mess out. And I would never encourage anyone to have to navigate this. It's awful. But yes, we should absolutely inform the board.
And we will inform the system office, and that's our due diligence. That's basically all that we can do. But we also want to know if they have a disaster plan, that plan B, as it were, in order to deal with this transition, which has been, on the books for 5 years now, or going on 6 years. Transitions like this are obviously complicated. But if there is that degree of disconnect between what's going on, and so we can't talk about Woodland Street anymore. I think they're all in downtown New Britain now, aren't they? The system office for the community college. And so,
Yes. Yes, they are.
yeah.
They're all in New Britain.
Yeah, all right. Then, we will do what we can to inform our normal contacts. I mean, Pam, you're hearing what's going on. But we will inform the assistant provost and the chair of the ASA and chair of the board. Those are the 3 people I think that we should inform, and the president of the CSCU as well. There's 4 people. So we'll send out an email on our to summarize the discussion that we have here and to alert them that a dire situation is impending and is actually not just imminent, but is actually occurring. Lois, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, I'm sorry, but if these people don't know that this is a huge problem, I have a problem with that.
Yeah, I don't know that they don't know, but we'll find out. Mike, you're
We say Pam's hand is also up.
Thank you, Mike.
Pam.
Two quick things, David and Kalina. If you still have your May 12th next FAC meeting, you might want to invite John Maduco, president of CT State, to come and hear your concerns directly. And also, if you're going to document these issues, I would also send it to him as well,
Yes.
not just to Rai Katoria and to the system office, but directly to the president of CT State.
Yes, thank you, Pam. That's
Okay, if I can
helpful.
facilitate his attendance at your next FAC meeting, I'll certainly assist in any way I can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we will proceed on that and consider the suggestion of having Maduco at our next meeting. I think that's a good idea, actually. Any further comments on this? If not, we are now at old and new business. Lena, do we have any leftover old business? No. Any new business? Lois?
During this meeting, I got a letter from Netchie in response to my public comment, to one of the public comments I submitted. And to give you some background about what I'm going to read you, do you all remember the strategic plan when Terry Brown and whatever his name is, somebody else came and gave us a PowerPoint presentation on the strategic plan? And then on the first page of the strategic plan, they made a comment about the tremendous help the Faculty Advisory Council to the BOR was in supplying honest and earnest feedback. You all remember that?
Oh, did I do?
All right, so I wrote that up as a piece of, as a part of the public comment I sent to Netchie. And I said, the last sentence in that paragraph, and I'm talking about the first paragraph on, or the fourth paragraph, whatever it is, on the first page, references the tremendous help the quote unquote Faculty Advisory Council to the BOR was in supplying honest and earnest feedback. It is the Faculty Advisory Committee, I wrote, not the council. And that body was never asked to give any feedback at the one meeting. The then chair of the Connecticut State Executive Strategic Planning Council attended. The FAC was given a PowerPoint presentation. The members asked a couple of questions which were ignored, and that was it. Request was sent to remove the statement. It was never answered. The statement was not removed. Okay, so that's what I wrote. So as part of the response from Netchie that I just got about an hour and a half ago, there's a statement in here that says, further, we understand from CSCU's response that although faculty advisory committee members have, quote, openly and repeatedly, unquote, been invited to participate in the strategic planning process, and all employees have been afforded opportunities to provide feedback on the draft strategic plan, quote, the faculty advisory committee has chosen not to participate, unquote. We concur with the system that establishing a shared governance structure for a brand new, okay, so anyway, so that's what they said. The people who wrote that progress report or responded to the public comment told them that we in the faculty advisory committee had been openly and repeatedly invited to participate in the strategic planning process, and we had chosen not to participate. Does anybody remember those invitations to be part of that strategic planning process?
I think we should look back, but I know that we decided not to give formal response when it was sent to us.
I did write a statement, which Lois, you included, I think, which was precisely saying what you just said,
So
that we had not provided feedback to them,
Right.
and that it was
So-
inaccurate to say that we had.
So does anybody
never
remember
mind.
that we have been openly and repeatedly invited to participate and provide feedback, and that we chose not to? Does anybody remember that? Does anybody see the smoke coming out of my ears right now?
I believe that Terry Brown saw that as the purpose of his visit to our meeting. And we chose
They
not
wrote this
to.
lie to Netchie, telling them that?
No, I do think that we chose to not respond. I think the problem.
Because we had been
that they-
openly and repeatedly invited to participate?
But Lois, I think the problem is that despite our refusal to, we were portrayed as having provided input.
That's right. I mean,
Yes.
I recall well if
Yes.
I can just say something here. Go ahead, Andre.
I mean, why don't you first address this question, because I'm going to talk about something related.
Okay, just my recollection of it was that the CEO Brown came to our meeting. There was a little bit of a PowerPoint with a dozen little headings on it, and a document which mentioned faculty once, but never in terms of shared governance or anything that was meaningful. And then what we said was that the framework that he was using was inadequate. And that's what we said. I recall distinctly my saying that. I've been involved in doing strategic plans at my university since 2000. And that was certainly an unacceptable framework, let's put it that way. Subsequently, I did not receive any invitations to provide any further input as at that point either chair or vice chair of the FAC.
Thank you.
Okay, Andre?
Yeah, as far as the whole process, I mean, there was a point at which there was a claim made to the accrediting body that faculty had participated in creating the curriculum, and my name appeared on the list. And my only input was that I tried to give input and was told to go to hell. They told me to leave the meeting and that my input wasn't welcome. So then, of course, my name is on a list of the faculty that participated in creating the curriculum. So when we had the visit from Netchie, I actually got up and said, folks, you do realize that you're going to be participating in a fraudulent process. And this is fraudulent from beginning to end. Okay. And of course, I also said that I guess if the governor wants to get the accreditation through, you're going to have to go along, swallow your ethics and your integrity, and indeed participate in the fraud. And I said, that's exactly what's going to happen. So Here we are.
Well, I'm sure that Kalina would have something further to add were her voice up to the the occasion. But if I channel her, we know that there's going to be considerable chaos and in the process, and we also know that there's been considerable misrepresentation, most of which went back to the previous Ojakian Gates administration. And I think that's important to specify. Although one should always be cautious, it's clear that there is a new leadership at the system office and at the Board of Regents. But they, like us, are stuck in a certain sense, although they may be more approving and we are more critical, with a process initiated going back to 2017, and which is now reaching the critical stage of the creation of this one community college on July the 1st. I think some efforts are being made at the system office and at the BOR to mitigate the worst aspects of what is about to happen. But it is about to happen. And so I think we need to be, if not acquiescing to it, at the very least, carefully looking to identify some of the key problems that we see. If the problem is with the degree works, and I can certainly imagine that happening, if it's with the registration process, and I can only wonder how a student looking at the aligned programs available might end up registering, living out here in the Winstead area for the submarine welding program, which is only available on one campus on the other side of the state. I have no idea how this is going to work out. And I think, we are if not the canaries in the mine pit, some of you at any rate are the actual workers in that mine pit. That's even worse. And we have to do what we can to alert those now in authority to the significant problems that we identify. Mike Shea?
Okay. So, yeah, I think that's really helpful what you're saying, David. I do think a lot of this is, I wouldn't want to call Chang a liar. I don't think he is. I think he is, I think he thought there were certain kinds of invitations, and I think we should assume it's a complicated situation when you're switching leaders like that. And I just think that he is probably communicating what he thought was the case. So I would just be careful about that. I think the problem is a lot in that changeover. And I think your point that I think they're probably more on board than we are, but probably trying to mitigate some of the worst part. Although we just talked about this terrible thing with registration. But anyway, I just don't think it helps. I think we've got a little bit of room here to move forward with, I think President Chang's willing to listen. I think we probably sounds like so far we've talked to the provost. He seemed pretty open. I just, I wouldn't want to poison it by accusing them of lying. I think at best at worst, I think it's just a misunderstanding, but that's just my opinion.
Thanks, Mike. Other comments? Lois, again?
I'm not okay with being called a liar and not being able to call them a liar.
Yeah, the question which Mike is asking, which is one I have too, is who exactly is them? That is to say, is it persons associated with the previous Ojakian administration, some of whom are now moving on to other fruitful occupation in the state system, or is it new leadership? And I'm not
This is a
sure.
response to public comments that were submitted on January 9th of 2023. Ojakian's gone.
But those comments were referring to a situation when Ojakian was around.
Oh, Ojakian was not here when that happened.
No, I'm not saying when that happened, but the testimony was about and their claim about that we were invited was including the time when Ojakin was here.
No,
So I'm
no, it wasn't. It was including that specific strategic plan. I'm not okay with being called a liar and not being able to call them a liar when they lied. This is a lie. This is a lie.
Yeah, do we recall exactly the date at which Brown came to us with that strategic plan proposal? Lois, do you happen to have that in the minutes, readily available?
Probably do. I would have to, oh, wait a minute, hold on. No, I'd have to look it up. I'm
Okay,
sure. I
why
know
don't
I
we
did.
check on that, Lois? And you know, I sympathize with your being concerned about the
This was a letter sent to me
terminology
from
involved.
Netchie quoting them.
And could you forward that letter to us?
Yes.
I'm going to put this again we'll put this on the agenda for the next meeting as well. Once we can clarify some of the dates, and we're going to, I think, request information as to who made that statement now being quoted by Neshi. So I think we need to do a bit more inquiry.
They made that statement. They're telling me they made that statement in their response to my public comment.
Yes, but do we know who is they? Is
Whoever
it,
wrote the public comment and then whoever had to review it before it was sent to Netchie. It wasn't done in a vacuum.
no, I agree.
The problem is that what probably happens is that the people who are in power now, and I agree, they do give us some reason for hope. They getting an inquiry like that one, they probably turn to their predecessors and ask them, well, so how did this happen and what did you do and all that kind of stuff, and they got the lies and they just repeated that. Trouble is they don't quite appreciate how bad people that came before them were, because it's kind of hard, you're stepping into a new job and you're replacing somebody. How are you supposed to know that the previous person was you know, 5-star SOB? I mean, I don't know. So that's, I think, the problem. They're just repeating the lies from the previous people.
And do we know if there's any actual strategic plan that was in fact submitted, or did all they do was submit again
I think I've seen one.
that letter with the framework?
I think I've seen it at some point.
So let's find that as well if we can. So Lois, could you send us the Neshi letter? Let's find what actually was submitted as a strategic plan, and let's find out who said
I have a
what.
copy of the strategic plan. That was the one that David, where you told them, sent them something that said to take that statement out of there.
Yes,
That
okay.
was the strategic plan.
That was the framework for a strategic plan. They were supposed to further develop it. Pam?
I believe there's an updated draft or a final that is in some way getting ready to be distributed. So I would reach out to John Maduco's office again and find out what the status is of the strategic plan for CT State.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's include this. Let's do a little bit more research, and let's include it as an agenda item, explicit agenda item for the next May meeting.
And I put a link to what they submitted in February with the strategic plan in the chat.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Let me, if I can even find the chat room. Where is that? Could you send it to me as a instant message or an email attachment? I am now at a loss to find the chat room, which is slightly embarrassing. I can find all these little. See, I can have a rabbit. I can find that. Okay. So that is there any further comment? I think it's obviously an issue that we have to come back to and look at in some detail. If not, we've arrived at 3:03.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn would be appropriate, Andre, yes?
That's
Otherwise,
good
as you know,
motion.
we have to stay here forever.
I'll second it if it's one that's already been sent foot forward.
Yes. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Kalina, could you start?